My husband looked at me from across the kitchen island, the same one we had picked out together more than 3 decades ago, and smiled like he already knew he'd won. "You'd never make it without me, Margaret." The room went still. Our son stared at his plate. His wife found something urgent to look at on her phone. And just like that, standing in the middle of a home I had poured my entire life into, I understood something that had been building for years. I had spent half my life quietly disappearing. One compromise, one silence, one swallowed word at a time, for people who would watch me break without saying a thing. When Richard slid the divorce papers across the counter with that confident, unhurried smile, he fully expected me to beg. He expected tears, panic, bargaining. He expected me to fold. Instead, I picked up the pen and signed. What he didn't know, what he never bothered to learn, was that I had already found the one thing he could never take from me. People always assume a marriage falls apart in some single dramatic moment. A screaming match, a scream door, a betrayal discovered in the worst possible way. But looking back now, I don't believe that's how it actually works. I think marriages like mine die the way water damages a foundation, quietly, slowly, one invisible crack at a time. When I met Richard Calloway, I was 27 years old and working the morning shift at a small bakery in Columbus, Ohio. He had one of those easy, open smiles that made a room feel warmer just by walking into it. He was charming and ambitious, the kind of man who noticed things other people didn't bother to notice. The first time he brought me flowers, they were yellow, not red, not pink, yellow, because that was my favorite color, and he had paid attention. I grew up believing love was built from exactly those kinds of small, careful details. Richard used to sit at the counter during my shift, ordering coffee he didn't even drink, just so our conversation could last a little longer. "You belong somewhere bigger than this," he told me once, leaning forward with that steady certainty in his eyes. And God help me, I believed him completely. We married less than a year later. For a while, life was genuinely beautiful. A modest house in a quiet neighborhood. Sunday mornings smelling like cinnamon rolls. Dancing in the kitchen, laughing over burned dinners, staying up late talking about everything we still wanted to become. That version of us felt real. I held on to it for a very long time. But I had no idea how quickly it was already beginning to change. Stay with me, because what happened next is something I kept hidden for 30 years, and it changes everything. Our son Daniel was 6 months old when Richard first suggested I leave my job. "At least one of us should be home," he said reasonably, bouncing the baby on his knee. "We'd save a fortune on childcare. It's only temporary." It sounded logical. It sounded like a partnership. Richard promised it wouldn't be forever. "You can always go back to work later, Maggie." So I stayed home. I packed lunches and attended teacher conferences and scrubbed mud from soccer uniforms at midnight. I tracked birthdays and prescriptions and dental appointments and school projects and every small, invisible task that keeps a family functioning. I was the one who remembered which teacher Daniel liked best, which medication needed a refill, which neighbor's name he always forgot. And slowly, without me noticing it happening, Richard stopped seeing any of that as real work. He began calling himself the provider. At first it was harmless, just a phrase, a small piece of identity, but then it became something else entirely. I remember one evening, about 15 years into our marriage, I mentioned that our washing machine kept flooding the laundry room and asked about replacing it. Richard sighed dramatically, the way someone sighs when they are performing patience rather than feeling it. "Do you have any idea how hard I work for that money, Margaret?" Our son, who was maybe 14, laughed. Just automatically, the way children laugh when an adult in the room laughs first, as if it were the natural response to something perfectly ordinary. I laughed too. That's the part that still hurts most when I replay it. I helped teach my own child that dismissing me was acceptable. I smiled along with my own diminishment, because it was easier than the silence that came when I didn't. Over the years, Richard became the undisputed center of everything inside that house. His schedule mattered most. His stress mattered most. His opinions became facts. Mine became interruptions. If I bought something for myself, no matter how small, he questioned it. If I forgot anything, a grocery item, a phone call, he'd shake his head slowly. "What would you do without me?" He said it like a joke at first, then he stopped joking. By the time I turned 60, I realized something terrifying. I couldn't remember the last time anyone had asked what I wanted. Not what I was cooking, not what I was planning, not what I was organizing, what I wanted. Richard had become very successful by then. A large house, a black luxury car in the driveway, neighbors who praised him at every gathering. "You're so lucky to have a man like Richard," people told me, year after year. Lucky. As if a beautiful kitchen made silence acceptable. As if granite countertops replaced dignity. But here's the thing about emotional cruelty. It rarely looks like anything from the outside. Keep reading, because what I found hidden in his office drawer would turn everything I thought I knew about our marriage completely upside down. I didn't go looking for it. I want to be honest about that. I was cleaning his home office one afternoon, the kind of routine task I'd done hundreds of times without a second thought, when I noticed a bank envelope tucked beneath a stack of old magazines. Something about the way it was folded, intentionally buried, made me hesitate. I almost put it back without opening it. I wish I had, in a way, but I didn't. The account balance showed just over $300,000, held in Richard's name alone. My hands started trembling before I had even finished reading the page. We had always shared finances, or at least I had believed we did. But that wasn't even the most disturbing part. The mailing address connected to that account wasn't our home. It was a private post office box downtown. And suddenly, after 34 years of marriage, I found myself standing in the middle of my own house, wondering if I had ever truly known my husband at all. I didn't confront him, not right away. I told myself there had to be a reasonable explanation, a retirement account, a business-related fund, something I was misunderstanding. Women like me become experts at explaining away behavior that frightens us. After enough years, denial starts sounding almost identical to survival. So I carefully folded the statement and placed it back exactly where I'd found it. Then I started paying attention. And once you start truly paying attention to someone who has been hiding things from you, you begin noticing everything. Richard guarded his phone as if it held classified information. He stepped outside to take calls. He smiled at text messages he never mentioned. Some evenings he came home wearing a cologne that wasn't his. Still, nothing hurt quite as much as what happened that following Sunday. Ethan and his wife came for dinner. I had spent the entire afternoon cooking, a full roast, homemade rolls, mashed potatoes, peach cobbler. Richard loved peach cobbler, or he used to. Midway through the meal, Ethan mentioned something about rising food costs. Richard leaned back in his chair and laughed. "Good thing I handled the finances all these years," he said, gesturing toward me carelessly. "Your mother would have bankrupted us by the 90s. Ethan smirked. His wife laughed softly. Something shifted inside me that night, not loudly, quietly, like ice cracking under too much weight. Because for the first time, instead of flinching and changing the subject the way I always had, I felt something unfamiliar take hold. Not rage, clarity. "I managed our household perfectly well," I said softly. The table went still. Richard looked genuinely surprised I had spoken at all. Then he smiled, that particular smile, and said it again. "You'd never survive without me, Margaret, and we both know it. Don't go anywhere, because what happened next, alone at that kitchen sink, was the moment I made the decision that changed the rest of my life." Richard fell asleep within minutes of his head hitting the pillow. He always did. Easily, completely, the way people sleep when they carry no guilt. I lay beside him in the dark for hours, staring at the ceiling fan rotating slowly overhead. 34 years. I kept turning that number over in my mind. 34 years of marriage, 34 years of compromise, 34 years of being told, in 100 small ways, that I was something less than capable. And the most painful part wasn't even the insult itself. It was how convincing it had become. Not just to him, to me. By 3 in the morning, I slipped out of bed and walked downstairs alone. The house felt enormous at night, cold. I stood in the kitchen where I had baked birthday cakes and helped with homework and wiped tears after heartbreaks that nobody else had seen. I had poured myself into every corner of that house until there was barely anything left of me, and yet somehow none of it actually belonged to me. I made coffee even though my stomach felt hollow. Then I opened the drawer beside the refrigerator and pulled out the bank statement again. $300,000. Hidden, separate, intentional. Richard had questioned every purchase I ever made for myself. He complained about money constantly. He sighed over groceries, over light bulbs, over anything I spent without permission. And behind all of it, he had been quietly constructing a private financial life I was never meant to see. A strange calm settled over me then. Not panic, not grief, clarity. For the first time in years, I stopped worrying about protecting Richard's feelings. By 9 that morning, after he left for work, I sat in my car outside a brick building downtown, with my hands wrapped so tightly around the steering wheel that my knuckles ached. The gold lettering beside the entrance read, "Patricia Walsh, Family Law Attorney." I almost drove away twice. Society teaches women my age that starting over is not something we do, that we survive, that we tolerate, that we quietly shrink until our time runs out. But somewhere underneath all those years of being told who I was, another voice had been waiting. What if there's still time? The receptionist handed me paperwork with a warm smile. Even writing my own name felt strange. Margaret Calloway, married homemaker, no independent income. The words looked so small on paper. When Patricia finally called me into her office, I nearly broke down before I even sat down. She looked at me with sharp, steady eyes that suggested she had heard 1,000 versions of this story and hadn't grown careless with any of them. "What can I help you with today, Mrs. Calloway?" I swallowed hard. "I think my husband has been hiding money from me." She adjusted her glasses and looked at the statement I placed on her desk. Then she looked at me and said 4 words I hadn't heard in years. "You are not powerless. Stay with me, because what my attorney uncovered in the weeks that followed was far worse than a hidden bank account, and Richard never saw it coming." Patricia gave me a list before I left her office. Tax records, retirement documents, property deeds, insurance files, bank statements going back years. "Do not confront him yet," she warned. "People who have been hiding money often become unpredictable when they realize they've been found." The drive home felt completely different from every drive I had taken before it. For the first time in decades, I wasn't simply reacting to Richard's choices, I was preparing. Over the following 2 weeks, I became someone my husband had never imagined I could be. I woke before him every morning to photograph documents. I copied files while he showered. I searched drawers, old boxes, a filing cabinet in the basement he assumed I never opened. And what I found terrified me. There wasn't just one hidden account. There were transfers, large, carefully timed transfers, moving thousands of dollars into accounts I had never been shown. The earliest ones stretched back nearly 7 years. One evening I sat at the dining table pretending to read while Richard scrolled through his phone nearby. "You've been quiet," he said casually. "I'm tired." He smirked. "You're still upset about dinner." I said nothing. He leaned back slowly. "Tara, you know a divorce would destroy you financially." He said it like fact, like concern, like something kind even. There it was again, not a warning, a threat. I looked at him carefully, and for the first time in years, I truly saw him. Not the young man who had ordered coffee just to sit beside me. Not my son's father. Not my husband. A man who had built his entire sense of power around my belief that I couldn't survive without him. That night I went back into his office. Tucked beneath a pile of insurance folders, I found wire transfer confirmations, dozens of them, some dated nearly 7 years back. One stood out immediately, $85,000, transferred 3 months earlier. The description field read, "Property liquidation." I frowned. We hadn't sold any property. Not that I knew of. My hands shook as I dug deeper. Then I found it. A property deed. Years ago, Richard and I had jointly inherited a small parcel of land from a relative. I remembered signing paperwork connected to it. But apparently Richard had sold it quietly, moved the money directly into his private account, and said nothing. Not one word. I sat alone in that dark office, holding the documents, while the truth I had been outrunning for months finally caught up to me. This wasn't just emotional cruelty anymore. This wasn't just belittling comments at dinner tables and questions about $40 sweaters. Richard had been methodically building an exit plan behind my back for years, and he had fully expected me to be too broken to notice. Keep watching, because what I found in an old tin box in the attic was something I never expected, and it gave me back the woman I had completely forgotten I was. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when I climbed up into the attic. I wasn't entirely sure what I was looking for. Maybe proof that I had existed before I became Richard Calloway's wife. The attic smelled like cardboard and old winters. Rain tapped softly against the roof while I moved through boxes I hadn't opened in years. Christmas decorations, my son's childhood drawings, photo albums, and then, tucked beneath an old blanket, I found a small floral tin. My breath caught the moment I recognized it. I hadn't seen that tin in over 20 years. Inside were recipe cards, dozens of them, my own handwriting in faded blue ink, blueberry crumb muffins, brown butter pecan cookies, cinnamon swirl bread, apple cobbler with a lattice crust. My fingers trembled holding them. Before I became someone's wife, before I became someone's mother, I had once been Margaret Mitchell, the girl who stayed up past midnight testing frosting recipes, the girl who dreamed about opening her own bakery someday because baking made her feel genuinely, completely alive. People used to line up on Saturday mornings just for my cinnamon rolls. My old manager used to shake his head and say, "Your hands are magic, Maggie." Richard had loved bragging about my baking when we first met. "You're going to own your own place someday," he used to say proudly. I had forgotten he once believed in me. At the bottom of the tin, I found something else, a folded letter in an envelope, my mother's handwriting. She had passed away nearly 15 years earlier after a long illness. Losing her had felt like losing the last person who truly saw me clearly. "Margaret, if you are reading this, perhaps you are finally remembering who you are." Tears burned instantly behind my eyes. "Your grandmother always said, women in our family survive everything. Not because life is easy for us, but because we know how to rebuild. You are the brave one. Don't let marriage make you forget that." Inside the envelope was a second document, a bank statement, a trust account in my name. Nearly $40,000 my mother had left me years before she died. I had completely forgotten it existed, and Richard had never once mentioned it. A sick, slow feeling moved through me. He had helped organize her paperwork near the end of her illness. He had access to everything. And yet somehow, this had simply disappeared from our conversations. I sat on the attic floor and cried for almost an hour. Not because of the money, because for the first time in years, I felt connected to the woman I had abandoned somewhere along the way, the one with flour-dusted aprons and big dreams and a laugh that used to fill a kitchen. That evening, I drove across town to see my oldest friend Claire, and she changed everything. Don't go anywhere, because Claire showed me something inside her kitchen that afternoon that I will never forget as long as I live. Claire owned a small cafe near the river. We hadn't spoken in years, not because we fought, but because Richard had a way of making outside friendships feel inconvenient over time. When I walked through her door, she stopped what she was doing behind the counter and stared at me. Then her face cracked open into the most genuine smile I had seen in years. "Margaret." She came around the counter and pulled me into a hug, and something about being held without expectation or judgment nearly broke me completely. We sat in a back booth while rain slid down the cafe windows. I told her everything, the hidden accounts, the divorce, the years of feeling invisible, all of it. When I finished, I stared at my untouched coffee, faintly embarrassed by how pathetic it all sounded spoken aloud. But Claire surprised me. "You know what I remember most about you?" She leaned forward slightly. "You used to walk into a kitchen like you owned it. You were fearless. Everybody talked about your baking. That was a lifetime ago." "No," she said firmly. "That was you." Then she stood up abruptly. "Come with me." She led me through the cafe and into the kitchen. The warmth hit me first. Butter, sugar, fresh bread. My chest tightened so painfully, I almost turned around. Claire crossed her arms. "My baker quit 3 weeks ago." I stared at her. "Claire, you heard me." She pointed toward the empty prep station. "I need help. I'm 62 years old. I haven't worked professionally in decades. I wouldn't know where to." She grabbed an apron off a hook and tossed it at me. "Make something." I stood there holding that apron, afraid in a way I hadn't been since I was very young. What if Richard was right? What if I really had become useless? Claire's voice softened. "When's the last time you did something that belonged only to you?" I couldn't answer that. Slowly, I tied the apron around my waist. The moment my hands touched the flour bins and mixing bowls, something strange happened. My body remembered before my mind did. Measurements, textures, timing, all of it came back as naturally as breathing. Claire watched quietly while I prepared cinnamon roll dough entirely from memory. "There she is," she said softly. An hour later, the kitchen smelled of warm cinnamon and butter. Claire tore off a piece of a fresh roll, tasted it, and her eyes went wide. "Are you kidding me?" I laughed nervously. She grabbed my shoulders. "I'm selling these on weekends, starting this Saturday." Fear rushed through me immediately, and something dangerously close to hope. That first weekend, I barely slept beforehand. I baked for hours before sunrise, and by the time Claire handed me an envelope at the end of the day, my hands were shaking. $342. My share of the day's sales. For the first time in over 30 years, I had earned money that belonged entirely to me. That night, I sat alone in my tiny apartment staring at that envelope. And then, slowly, I smiled. But just when things were starting to feel possible again, Richard showed up. And what he did next in front of a crowd of strangers was something I will never forget. The Saturday Richard came to the farmer's market started like any other cold October morning. I was up before dawn, frosting cinnamon rolls in the community kitchen I'd begun renting during off hours, soft music playing from a radio in the corner. For the first time in months, I felt something that resembled peace. Not happiness exactly, something quieter, steadiness. By 8:30, I had loaded trays of pastries into my car and driven downtown to the Riverside Market. Claire helped me arrange everything neatly. Apple cakes in the center, pecan bars to the left, cinnamon rolls near the front because people always bought those first once they smelled them. Claire stepped back and smiled. "It looks beautiful." I straightened the handwritten sign nervously. Margaret's Homemade Bakery. The name still felt like it belonged to someone braver. Customers arrived slowly and then steadily. An older man bought banana bread for his wife. A young mother chose muffins for her children. One woman told me my peach cobbler reminded her of her grandmother's kitchen, and I nearly cried behind the table. Little by little, the fear began to loosen. Then I saw the black car. My stomach dropped before I even consciously recognized it. Richard parked along the curb near the entrance and crossed the market toward my table with that unhurried, entitled walk, the one that assumed the world naturally made space for him. He glanced at my booth the way someone looks at something they find mildly embarrassing. "Well," he said loudly, "look at this." Several nearby customers turned immediately. He picked up one of my cookies and inspected it like he was evaluating something at a garage sale. "This is what you're doing now." Claire stepped forward. "She's working, Richard." "Cute little hobby," he said, setting the cookie back down carelessly. Heat rose into my face instantly. "It's not a hobby." "Come on, Margaret, you're selling baked goods at a flea market." The words landed exactly the way they were meant to. Not as an observation, as a performance. He wasn't speaking to me. He was performing for the crowd. "You had financial security," he continued, gesturing around the market. "Stability. And now you're standing out here in the cold, asking strangers to buy muffins." A few customers nearby looked horrified. One woman quietly put back the pastry she'd been holding and stepped away. I wanted to disappear. Part of me wanted to scream. Instead, I heard myself say, quietly, "I'm not asking anyone for anything." He laughed. "Come on, Tara. We both know this little fantasy won't last." I looked at him steadily. "You're trying to make sure I still feel afraid of you." The silence that followed was immediate and heavy. For a brief moment, I saw something flicker across his face. Not arrogance, uncertainty. Then it vanished. "You always were dramatic," he muttered. He tossed the cookie back onto the tray and walked away. And as I watched him go, I noticed our son standing near the far edge of the parking lot beside his truck. He had been there the entire time. Our eyes met briefly, and instead of walking toward me, he followed his father. That hurt more than anything Richard ever said. "Stay with me," because that evening, a stranger's phone call changed everything. And within days, the whole story had flipped completely. The morning after the farmer's market, I woke up expecting humiliation to greet me. Instead, I found 12 new orders waiting in my inbox. I read them twice, then a third time. Cinnamon rolls, peach cobblers, custom birthday orders, a corporate catering inquiry. My phone kept buzzing with messages from strangers who had seen a video recorded at the market the evening before. A woman who had witnessed everything had posted it locally, and it had spread quietly overnight. The comments underneath stunned me. "Her pastries are incredible. That man is emotionally abusive. She deserves better." Ordering immediately. This woman handled herself with more dignity than I ever could. For years, Richard had convinced me that the world would see me the way he did. Helpless, dependent, an object of pity. But strangers were seeing something I couldn't yet recognize in myself. Strength. Within a week, orders were coming faster than I could fill them alone. Claire introduced me to 2 women she knew from her church, Janice, recently widowed at 68, and Denise, a retired cafeteria worker helping support her granddaughter. Both women were starting over. All of us were. By the end of that first week together, flour covered half the kitchen, Denise had dropped an entire tray of cookies, and I had laughed harder than I had in years. Real laughter. The kind that loosens something tight inside your chest. That was the beginning. A month later, a woman named Naomi Walker approached my booth at the market. She introduced herself quietly, ate one of my cinnamon rolls, and said 4 words. "Have you considered expansion?" I nearly choked. Naomi Walker ran a hospitality group that owned restaurants and boutique hotels across Ohio. She wasn't offering charity, she was offering investment because she believed the business could work. "You have something people connect with," she told me, "not just the pastries." 6 months later, Second Rise Bakery opened its first permanent location in downtown Columbus. I arrived before sunrise on opening morning. Janice was already there tying on her apron. Denise was reorganizing the pastry display with intense focus. Claire arrived last, grinning like a proud older sister. By 8:15, the lines stretched onto the sidewalk. Through all of it, Richard grew increasingly desperate. He showed up unannounced. He sent bitter texts. He stood outside the bakery one cold evening and told me I had built this with his money, with his settlement, with resources that were only mine because of him. "I built this after surviving you," I said quietly. He had no answer. The last time I saw him was at a small park near the river, neutral ground, a brief meeting he had asked for. He looked older, tired, like a man no longer performing anything for anyone. "I used to believe if you ever left me, you'd fall apart," he admitted. "But the truth is, I was the one terrified of being alone." He asked if I thought I could ever fully forgive him. I thought carefully before answering. Forgiveness isn't forgetting what happened. It's refusing to let the pain become your entire identity forever. The sun was low over the river when I finally stood to leave. Richard looked up at me quietly. "You used to need me," he said. "I know," I answered honestly. "I just believed I did." 3 years later, Second Rise Bakery operates 4 locations across Ohio. We run a paid apprenticeship program for women over 50, rebuilding their lives after divorce, widowhood, or years of caregiving. Because I learned something during my own rebuilding that I want to carry forward. Women are not too old to begin again. We are often just too exhausted from spending decades caring for everyone else to remember that our own lives still belong to us. Divorce at 62 felt like destruction when it happened. Later, I understood it was something else entirely. It was the moment my real life finally began. If you are watching this while feeling trapped, invisible, or afraid it's simply too late, please hear me. Your worth was never dependent on someone else's willingness to recognize it.